Apache rode through the burning desert, with dust rising behind him like a fading trail of ghosts. He had escaped a shootout in a small frontier town, and every breath felt like it carried the taste of danger. The air was thick with heat, and the sky above him was turning black with the promise of a coming storm. Wounded and exhausted, he pushed his horse onward, searching for any place to hide and regain his strength. Lightning cracked across the horizon and thunder rolled like distant gunfire. Apache knew he needed shelter before the sky tore open and washed the land with rain and fury. He spotted a shadow against the canyon wall, a dark opening that looked like the mouth of the earth itself. He guided his tired horse toward it, hoping it was deep enough to shield him from nature and from the men chasing him inside the cave. The air was cool and still, the silence wrapped around him like a blanket, offering him a moment to breathe and gather his thoughts. Apache moved deeper, using the faint light of the storm to guide his steps. As he walked, he noticed something strange. This was no ordinary cave. There were carved bowls made from stone and dried pelts laid neatly in one corner. The walls were painted with symbols and shapes that spoke of a life lived far from the noise of towns and gunfire. Someone lived here, someone who survived off the land with the instincts of a wild creature. Apache tensed and reached for his gun, but before he could draw it, he sensed movement behind him. Turned slowly, letting his eyes adjust. There she stood, a girl, barely grown yet, with the presence of something ancient. Her hair fell around her like tangled sunlight, and her eyes reflected the glow of the wolves that stood at her side. The wolves did not growl, they simply watched him with cold, patient understanding. The girl stepped closer, her movements smooth and silent like wind sliding over stone. She did not speak. Apache could see she was wary, but she did not seem afraid. He lowered his weapon, showing he meant no harm. The storm outside began to crash against the cave mouth, filling the air with the smell of rain and earth. Apache stumbled slightly, his wound sending a sharp ache through his body. The girl watched him for a long moment, then approached with cautious steps. She touched his arm with a feather-light hand and guided him toward a place near the wall where furs lay. Her wolves circled them but did not interfere. Apache sat down and felt the rough strength of the Puffin stork girl as she bound his wound with strips of cloth. Softened by use, she did not speak in words, yet her gestures carried a clarity that needed no language. Apache rested while the storm roared on. He watched the girl as she moved around the cave with the grace of a creature born from the wilderness. She interacted with the wolves like they were her kin. She shared food with them first, then brought some to him. Her eyes held curiosity, innocence, and something deeper, something ancient and unbroken by the world of men. Apache found himself drawn to her not only because she had saved him, but because she carried in her silence a kind of wild purity he had never known. As days passed, the storm subsided, but Apache did not leave. His wound still needed healing, yet there was more that kept him in the cave. The girl began to trust him little by little. She no longer kept her distance, and sometimes she sat beside him while he spoke softly, even though she did not understand his words. She watched his face, his hands, his expressions. Apache taught her small things, showing her the meaning of simple objects and gestures. In return, she taught him the rhythm of the wild. She showed him how to read the wind and the tracks of animals. She taught him how to move quietly enough to approach a deer without startling it. The bond between them deepened like the roots of a desert tree, stretching through dry earth, seeking water. They shared meals, hunts, and silent evenings, lit only by the flicker of fire. Her wolves accepted him, becoming guardians of their growing connection. Sometimes Apache woke to find her sitting near him, brushing his hair from his eyes with a touch that trembled with unspoken emotion. He began to understand pieces of her past. He saw flashbacks in the paintings on the cave walls, a wagon destroyed by raiders, a child left behind, wolves finding her and raising her as one of their own. Her story was carved in symbols that spoke of lost survival and the shaping of a spirit that refused to break. Apache felt a fierce protectiveness for her, feeling her life story intertwined with his own troubles and regrets. Their closeness slowly grew into something tender, something that warmed the cave even in the cold desert nights. Apache felt a stirring in his heart, a kind of affection he had not allowed himself to feel in years. The girl would sit beside him, her head resting against his shoulder, trusting him with the kind of absolute faith only found in creatures of the wild. Her wolves lay around them, forming a silent circle of protection, but danger always returns on the frontier. Apache knew the man who hunted him would not give up. One night he heard distant hoofbeats echoing through the canyon. He stood ready, preparing to leave in order to protect the girl and her wolves, but she grabbed his hand, her eyes filled with fear and pleading. It was the first time he had seen her express emotion so openly. Apache realized then that he was no longer alone in this world. He had found someone worth fighting for, someone worth protecting. With his last breath together, they retreated deeper into the Pithana wilderness. The wolves led the way, guiding them through hidden paths. Apache and the girl moved as one, blending into the rugged desert landscape. Their hearts beat with the same ancient rhythm, a harmony born from trust, survival, and blossoming love. In the silence of the desert nights beneath the endless sky, Apache finally understood that the cave had not been a place of refuge, but a place of destiny, a place where a wounded man and a wild heart met and created something rare and powerful, a bond untouched by civilization, unshaken by danger, and unbroken by fear. Their story began with a storm, but it grew into something softer, something filled with warmth and the promise of a world where love could bloom even in the harshest of lands. Apache pushed his weary horse through the rugged mountains with the cold wind cutting against his skin like tiny blades. He had escaped a deadly ambush by bounty hunters who believed him guilty of crimes he never committed. The mountains rose around him like giant stone guardians, silent and indifferent to the struggles of men. Apache felt his strength fading, but he pressed on, knowing that stopping meant death. Snow dusted the ground, and the air carried the scent of pine and fear. Every sound echoed strangely among the cliffs, reminding him that danger could follow him even here. As he rode along a narrow path, his horse suddenly stumbled, and Apache fell to the ground. Pain rippled through his side where a bullet had grazed him. He groaned and pulled himself toward a cluster of boulders, seeking shelter. That was when he spotted the entrance to a cave hidden behind a curtain of wild ivy. Desperation drove him forward, and he crawled inside, hoping to find a place to hide and rest. Cave interior surprised him. Soft pelts lined the floor, and small handmade tools rested against the walls. Apache realized he was not the first living soul to step inside this place, but he was too exhausted to question it. He slumped against the cave wall, letting the cool darkness ease his pain. A soft rustle broke the silence. Apache opened his eyes and found himself looking into a pair of glowing yellow eyes. A wolf stood before him, huge and silent. The animal did not attack. Instead, it watched him with a calm intelligence that made him hesitate to reach for his gun. Before he could react, another figure appeared behind the wolf. A girl, barefoot, clad in furs, her hair long, uncut, and wild, her posture alert, like a creature born from the forest rather than from a home. Her eyes were sharp and filled with something between caution and curiosity. She moved with the same grace as the wolves beside her. Apache knew at once she was different from any woman he had ever seen. She approached him slowly, her expression unreadable. Her wolves remained close, ready to defend her. Apache raised his hands in surrender. He meant no harm and hoped she could sense that the girl tilted her head, studying him the way a wolf studies a stranger. Then, without a word, she knelt beside him. She touched the wound at his side with gentle fingers and inspected it like a healer familiar with survival. She left the cave for a moment and returned carrying herbs, roots, and strips of cloth. She cleaned his wound with careful movements, pressing leaves against it to draw out the heat and pain. Apache winced, yet he felt the sincerity in her touch. The wolves lay down nearby, watching him with a sense of wary acceptance. Apache understood that she was helping him despite not knowing who he was. Over the next few days, Apache recovered slowly. The girl remained silent, using gestures to communicate. She brought him water from a nearby spring and hunted small animals to feed both him and her wolves. Apache noticed the bond she shared with the creatures. They listened to her heartbeats, her steps, her signals. She was one of them, raised by them. Shaped by their world, Apache began to speak softly, even though she did not know his language. He told her his name, his story, the reason he was running. She listened, her eyes following his expressions, her fingers sometimes touching objects he mentioned as if trying to understand. She seemed fascinated by the sound of his voice, even if the meaning escaped her. One evening she sat beside him and traced a symbol on the cave floor, a drawing of a wolf, a child, and a broken wagon. Apache realized she was showing him her past, a family traveling across the frontier, a tragedy, a child left behind, wolves discovering her and raising her in the wild. Her story echoed through the lines she carved into the dirt. Apache felt an ache in his heart for the life she had lost and the life she had built from the ashes. As the days turned into weeks, their bond deepened. Apache taught her small words, beginning with simple things like fire, water, sky, and his name. She repeated them slowly, her voice soft and unused to human speech. He smiled each time she spoke. Her voice was rough yet beautiful, like wind rustling through pine branches. In return, she taught him how to move like the wild, how to track animals by broken twigs and faint footprints, how to sense a change in the weather by the smell of the wind, how to listen to the forest the way wolves listen to their surroundings. Apache felt himself reconnecting with a part of the world he had long forgotten. The part untouched by men, guns, or fear. Their closeness grew naturally, not through words but through shared moments of trust. She began sitting beside him during the quiet nights. Sometimes she would rest her head against his shoulder. Her wolves curled around them, forming a living shield against the cold. In those moments, Apache felt peace for the first time in years. He realized he cared for her with a depth that ran deeper than any feeling he had ever known. But peace never lasts long on the frontier. One morning, Apache heard distant shouts. The bounty hunters had tracked him to the mountains. The girl sensed danger instantly. The wolves bristled and stood between Apache and the cave entrance. Apache knew he had to leave. He could not bring danger into her world. He tried to stand, but she grabbed his arm, shaking her head, her eyes pleading for him to stay. Her expression carried fear, sorrow, and something else, something like love. Apache touched her cheek gently, silently, promising her he would return. He stepped out of the cave, ready to face whatever waited for him. The wolves stood beside him, refusing to let him go alone. But the girl whistled a soft sound and the wolves reluctantly backed away. She trusted Apache to survive. She believed he would come back to her. Apache confronted the hunters, using the terrain to his advantage. The battle was fierce, but Apache fought with newfound strength. Fueled by the thought of the girl waiting in the cave, he defeated the hunters and sent the survivors fleeing. When he returned to the cave, exhausted, bloodied, yet alive, the wolves greeted him first with cautious joy. Then the girl emerged, her eyes shining with relief. She ran to him and wrapped her arms around him. It was the first time she held him fully, without fear or hesitation. In that moment, Apache knew he belonged with her. Together they stood at the cave entrance with the wolves surrounding them like loyal guardians. The mountains whispered in the wind, and the forest carried the promise of a future shaped by their love. Not a love built on words, but on trust, heart, and shared survival. a love that crossed the line between the world of men and the world of the wild. Apache traveled across the sunburned mesas with the weight of danger following him like a silent shadow. He had crossed paths with the cavalry after being falsely accused of aiding outlaws, and now he was hunted. Without mercy, dust rose behind him as he pushed his tired horse through the rugged landscape, seeking a place to hide from the patrols sweeping the land. Legends told of a haunted cave hidden among the cliffs, a place where spirits roamed and no man dared to linger. Apache did not fear spirits. He feared the living far more, so he guided his horse toward the lonely mesa, hoping the stories would be enough to keep pursuers away. As he approached the cave, the wind howled like a wounded animal, and the cliffs echoed with eerie groans. His horse shivered, but Apache pressed forward, leading the animal inside the shadowed opening. The air felt cooler within the cave, and the silence wrapped around him like a heavy cloak. Apache moved deeper, letting his eyes adjust to the dim light. He expected nothing more than dust bats and empty space, but instead he found signs of life. Dried meats hung neatly on wooden pegs. Animal pelts lay arranged across the floor. Small clay bowls filled with berries sat near a smooth stone used as a grinding surface. This was no abandoned haunt. Someone lived here, someone who understood the land and its secrets. A sudden movement made Apache freeze. He turned slowly and saw a girl standing in the darker corner of the cave. Her figure blended with the shadows, her posture steady and alert. Her hair flowed in tangled waves around her shoulders, and her eyes gleamed like a mountain cat at dusk. At her feet rested two wolf pups, watching him with curious calm. The girl stepped forward, her footsteps silent, her expression unreadable. She moved like one shaped by the wilderness, strong, swift, and unafraid. Apache raised his hands to show peace. The girl studied him with a gaze that seemed to look straight through him into his soul. She did not speak, yet the way she held herself told him she understood far more than she revealed. Her wolves watched his every movement, ready to protect her if needed. Apache remained still, respecting her world and her rules. She gestured to the wound on his arm, a deep gash from scraping a canyon wall during his escape. Without hesitation, she approached and took his hand, leading him toward a flat rock where she had herbs and salves prepared. Her touch was gentle yet firm. She cleaned the wound with crushed leaves and cool water. Apache felt the sting fade, replaced by a soothing warmth that told him she knew the healing practices of the land better than any town doctor. Over the next few days, Apache stayed in the cave while the cavalry patrols combed the mesa. He kept quiet, hiding in the shadows, while the girl moved freely, guiding the wolves out to hunt and bringing back food for them all. She lived with the land, not against it. Her movements told stories of years spent among cliffs and canyons, far from the reach of towns and people. Apache sensed a deep loneliness in her, a solitude she had not chosen but learned to accept. At first she kept her distance, watching him with cautious eyes. Sometimes she vanished for hours, leaving him wondering if she had abandoned the cave entirely. But then she would return, silently placing food beside him or tending to his wound without a word. Her kindness came in actions rather than speech. Slowly, Apache began earning her trust. One evening he followed her as she walked toward the entrance of the cave. The sun was setting, painting the sky with red and gold. She stood at the edge of the mesa, her face turned toward the fading light. Apache could see the softness in her profile, the quiet strength, the hidden longing. He felt drawn to her, not with the sudden heat of passion, but with the slow, steady warmth of understanding. She glanced at him, her eyes holding a question, a challenge, and something like acceptance. Their early encounters were strange. Sometimes she would steal his rifle and hide it high on a ledge as if testing his patience. Other times she would mimic the cry of a hawk to warn him of approaching riders. Apache learned to read her signals even when they came from gestures or the tilt of her head. They existed in a delicate balance, one learning the ways of the other. Turning point came when poachers entered the mesa, men with vicious intentions hunting wolves for their pelts. The girl heard them, First, her wolves growled a low warning. Without hesitation, she rushed toward the danger. Apache followed, unable to let her face such men alone. Poachers cornered one of the wolves and raised their rifles. The girl stepped forward, fearlessly throwing a stone that struck one of the men. Apache charged in, wrestling with the other poacher. The fight was brutal but quick. Together they drove the poachers off, saving the wolves from harm. Afterward, the girl approached Apache, her eyes filled with gratitude and a warmth he had not seen before. She reached up and touched his cheek gently. For the first time she smiled. It was small yet powerful, glowing with trust. From that moment their bond deepened. The wolves began treating Apache as part of their pack. He shared meals with the girl, sat beside her during the evenings, and learned her silent language. She showed him hidden trails carved by ancestors long gone. She revealed to him a secret canyon where water flowed clear and bright even in the driest months. Apache taught her words slowly, patiently. She repeated them with soft breath, forming human speech she had long forgotten. Her voice carried a fragile beauty, like a stream whispering through stones. Nights on the mesa became something sacred. They sat near the fire, the wolves curled beside them. Apache spoke of his past, of mistakes and battles, of the long road that had led him to her. She listened, her eyes reflecting the flames and the quiet understanding of the wild in her presence. Apache felt the hardness inside him begin to soften. The desert wind carried the scent of juniper and the whisper of a future he had never dared to imagine, but danger still circled the land. The cavalry had not given up. Apache saw riders approaching from the canyon and knew he could not stay. He prepared to leave, but the girl grabbed his hand, her grip fierce, her eyes filled with fear. She did not need words. Her expression pleaded with him. "Do not abandon me." Apache felt his heart tear. He could not bring danger into her fragile world, but he also could not leave her alone to face a life shaped only by survival and silence. She needed him, and he needed her more than he had ever needed anything. Together they fled deeper into the Badlands, following the paths only she knew. The wolves guided them with sharp ears and swift feet. Apache and the girl moved like one being, as if their souls had intertwined with the wind and the stone. As they disappeared into the maze of canyons, the cavalry rode past, unaware of the world hidden just beyond their reach. In the nights that followed, Apache and the girl built a life far from the noise of war and men. Their love grew like a desert flower blooming in the most unlikely place, a love born from danger, strengthened by trust, and carried by the wild heart of the mesa itself. Apache walked alone through the barren desert, with the sun sinking behind the mountains like a fading ember. His boots dragged through sand and dust, and each breath felt heavy with regret. He carried a past filled with mistakes, fights, and broken promises, a past that chased him like an unfed wolf. After days of wandering with no food and little water, Apache finally collapsed near the entrance of a narrow cave hidden between two jagged rocks. His vision blurred and his heartbeat slowed as darkness wrapped around him like a silent blanket. When Apache opened his eyes, he found himself lying on a bed of soft fur. A gentle light flickered nearby, casting shadows across the stone wall as he tried to sit, but pain shot through his body and he fell back again. Then he saw her, a girl kneeling beside him, her hair long and wild, and her eyes bright with an untamed fire. She studied him with a mix of caution and curiosity. Her movements were quiet and fluid, like a creature shaped by the wilderness. Two wolves sat behind her, watching him with protective calm. Apache realized she had brought him into the cave. She held a bowl of water made from carved wood and pressed it to his lips. He drank slowly, feeling strength seep back into his body. The girl did not speak. Her eyes spoke for her, full of instinct, full of depth, full of a life lived far from the world of men. She examined his wound, a long gash across his ribs, likely caused by a fall during his wandering. Using crushed herbs and strips of hide, she cleaned and wrapped it with surprising skill. Apache felt her hands steady, warm, and sure. She moved with a purpose that spoke of survival, knowledge, and experience. He watched her in awe, wondering how someone so young had learned the ways of healing in such a harsh land. In the days that followed, the girl tended to him without fear. Each time Apache woke, she was there offering water, food, or silence. The wolves rested near him, accepting his presence though remaining alert. Apache tried speaking, but she only tilted her head, listening to his tone rather than his words. She understood emotion but not language. Her world was one of instinct, not speech. Apache began observing her movements. She walked on soft feet, barely making a sound. She listened to the wind, the earth, and the distant cries of animals. She communicated with the wolves through small gestures, the flick of a finger, the shift of her shoulders, the sound of a soft breath. She was wild yet gentle, fierce yet tender, a heart shaped by solitude yet carrying a quiet longing. One evening, as the sky outside turned dark, the girl sat beside Apache. She traced symbols on the cave floor using a small stick: a child, a family, a fire, a wolf van. She drew herself alone. Apache understood she had lived through great loss, perhaps a family taken by tragedy or separated by the harshness of the frontier. The wolves had become her family and the cave her shelter. Her story was carved in silence, yet louder than any spoken words. As Apache healed, he found himself drawn to her. She moved with an honesty that men rarely carried. Her eyes were full of wonder and trust. He taught her small words like water, fire, sun, and his name. At first she struggled, but slowly her voice emerged, soft, hesitant, delicate. Each word she learned felt like a gift, a bridge between their two worlds. In return, she taught him how to survive in the wild, how to follow the tracks of deer through rocky ground, how to sense danger by the shift of wind, how to read the patterns of birds, to know where predators lurked. Apache felt his old life fading, replaced by a calmer rhythm, one shaped by nature and the girl who lived within it. Their bond grew naturally. Sometimes she would sit close her shoulder, brushing his. Other times she brought him fresh berries, placing them gently in his hands with shy eyes. Once she rested her head against his chest, listening to his heartbeat as if it was a song she had never heard before. Apache felt his own heart grow lighter. He had found something rare, a connection built from tenderness, trust, and shared survival. But danger never stays away for long. One morning, Apache heard distant shouting, the kind that carried across the desert like an unwelcome messenger. Settlers searching for the wolf girl. They had heard stories of her and believed she was dangerous. Apache saw fear in her eyes as she recognized the sound of human voices. She clung to him, trembling. The wolves pressed close, forming a protective circle. Without hesitation, Apache prepared to defend her. He knew the settlers would try to capture her, believing they were saving her from the wild. But she did not need saving. She had built a life where she belonged, a life stronger than the world outside. The settlers approached the cave. Apache stepped out, ready to face them. They aimed rifles, demanding he move aside. He refused. A fierce determination burned in his eyes. He would not let them take the girl. She was no creature to be trapped. She was a soul of the wilderness, and she belonged with those who understood her. Wolves growled from the shadows, protecting their beloved companion. The settlers hesitated, unsure whether to shoot. Apache used the moment to disarm their leader and force them back. He warned them with a voice filled with the strength he thought he had lost. They left reluctantly, defeated by a man ready to fight for love. When Apache returned to the cave, the girl ran into his arms. She touched his face, her eyes shining with gratitude, with emotion, with affection. It was the first time she held him without fear or hesitation. In that moment, Apache felt something shift within him. He knew he belonged with her, not in the world of men, but in the quiet wilderness where hearts spoke in silence and love grew like wildflowers after a storm together. They left the cave and disappeared into the open land, guided by wolves and the promise of a new life, a life where nature and love wrapped around them like a warm blanket, a life far away from danger, far away from the noise of the frontier. A life where a man with a wounded past and a girl with a wild heart became each other's refuge. Apache rode across the frozen badlands with the wind cutting through his coat like knives. The snow swirled around him, covering the tracks of his past mistakes and the dangers that hunted him. He had fled from a town where men had accused him falsely, and every step carried the weight of guilt and fear. As the night fell, the cold grew sharper, and his strength began to wane. He searched desperately for shelter, praying for a cave, a hollow place untouched by men and their cruelty. Through the haze of snow, he spotted a dark opening in the side of a cliff. He guided his horse toward it, slipping and sliding on icy ground until he reached the cave entrance. The wind roared behind him, but inside the cave the air was calm and strange. It smelled of earth, fur, and something ancient. Apache dismounted and led his horse further inside. His eyes adjusting to the faint light, to his astonishment, he discovered signs of life. Animal furs lined the floor. Bones carefully arranged were used for tools. A small fire pit sat unused but ready. It was clear that someone had lived here, hidden from the world of men for a long time. A rustle came from the shadows and he froze. Then a figure stepped into the dim light, a girl, tall and wild-haired, with eyes that glimmered like moonlight on snow. She moved with the confidence of a creature born in the wild. At her feet lay two large wolves, their fur blending with the shadows. They watched Apache silently, and he felt the weight of their judgment. She did not speak. Her gaze was wary yet curious. Apache raised his hands in peace, showing he meant no harm. The girl studied him a long time before stepping closer. Her movements were fluid and cautious. She knelt and gestured to a pile of furs for him to sit. Then she brought water, pressed against his lips, and watched him drink. Apache realized she had been living alone since childhood, raised by wolves after a tragedy that took her family. Her presence was wild yet filled with a strange grace. Had never seen anyone move with such perfect harmony with animals in the land. The wolves circled him but did not attack. It was as if they understood he belonged to her now in some way. Over the next days, Apache recovered under her care. She hunted with her wolves and brought him food. She showed him hidden paths in the mountains. He spoke slowly, teaching her words she had never known. Her first attempts were rough, yet each sound carried a beauty that made Apache smile. He taught her the simplest things, and she taught him the secrets of survival he had long forgotten. Nights in the cave became a place of closeness. They sat together beside a small fire. The wolves curled around them. She brushed his hair back from his face with gentle fingers. He felt a warmth growing inside him, a connection deeper than words. It was not only attraction but a merging of hearts, a recognition of shared loneliness and strength. Their trust grew steadily. She showed him where water ran under the ice, how to read the tracks of deer beneath the snow, how to anticipate the approach of danger by the slightest change in the wind. Apache in turn showed her fire and clothing to keep warm, and how to move quietly among people when needed. The lessons were small, yet monumental. They spoke of care, respect, and survival. As winter deepened, the bond became undeniable. Apache awoke to find her sitting beside him, tracing symbols on the stone floor of the cave. A family, a forest, a child alone, a wolf her story carved silently into the rock. He understood her past, her loss, and her strength. She had survived alone, yet he realized she had room in her heart for trust and affection. One night the howl of distant hunters echoed across the Badlands. Apache knew they were searching for the girl, believing her dangerous. He rose to defend her. She grabbed his arm, her eyes wide. Her wolves circled them, ready to protect. Apache promised silently he would not let them take her. Together they prepared to face the threat. Using the knowledge she had taught him, the hunters approached and Apache confronted them. He moved like the wind across snow, using every skill she had shared. The wolves attacked to protect their companion. The girl stood by Apache, guiding the pack. The hunters were defeated, driven away by the combination of wild instincts and Apache's determination. When the danger passed, the girl ran into his arms. She clung to him without hesitation, her warmth melting the cold that had surrounded his heart. From that night onward, they were inseparable. They left the cave, exploring the mountains together. The wolves ran ahead as guides and guardians. Apache and the girl moved as one through hidden valleys and snow-covered cliffs. Their love grew. From trust, care, and survival, it was a love that needed no words, for the heart spoke clearly in shared glances, gestures, and quiet moments. Spring came, and with it the thaw of snow, revealing the beauty of the land. They watched the first flowers bloom. Together, the wolves at their feet, Apache knew he had found not just a companion, but a soul that mirrored his own. The girl had shown him the power of love, unbound by society, unshaken by danger, and untouched by fear. She had created a world where hearts connected beyond the constraints of language or civilization. In the open badlands beneath endless skies, Apache and the girl stood together, their hands entwined, their hearts beating as one. The wolves sat nearby, silent guardians of a bond that had grown through struggle, trust, and affection. They had found each other in a world of hardship and danger, and together they had forged a life of love, wild freedom, and shared survival. Cave that had once been a refuge now symbolized destiny. It was the place where a wounded man and a girl raised by wolves had discovered each other, where trust had blossomed into love, where the wilderness itself had conspired to unite two souls meant to be together. And as the sun rose over the mountains, casting golden light across the snow, Apache knew that they had found more than safety. They had found home.